one last thing. This is your last chance to say anything to those folks back in Oklahoma City watching tonight.
I love y'all guys, man. Thanks for all the support. We got the win for y'all. I'll see y'all.
All right, Kevin Durant and company. I think it was a team effort. What a win tonight.
I come in here and go to work every day. I don't cause no problems. I play the right way. Or I try to play the right way. I try to be the best player I can be every possession.
KD is now 10th all-time in scoring, and he passed your record for the most consecutive free throws made in a single season. I have to ask, were you comfortable giving him the reins, or did you give him a little bit of a hard time with that?
I'm the point guard. He's a scorer.
Now, if I had a nickel for every time KD news hit my timeline on a holiday, I'd have 2 nickels. Not a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. Welcome back to the show. Caleb here with my boy Noel, and today we're going to be talking about some Kevin Durant news that came out recently on Christmas. Hit the timeline Christmas morning. That's exactly how I woke up. He ended up saying that Suns officials can feel KD's frustration with the current team, and with this recent super team, we thought it'd be a really good idea to sort of go back and see how he's got here, as well as look at his career as a whole. So, Noel, how you doing, my man? Happy New Year to you, and why don't we get 2024 started off right?
This is really the best way that we know how to, talking some basketball, coming back to the channel, hanging out with everybody. Caleb, it's always an honor, always a great time. Just chopping it up, doing our thing, you know. The NBA, never short of drama, never short of breaking news, never short of just pure entertainment. So let's get right into it. You know, Mr. Kevin Durant, he's someone that goes crazy on the court, goes crazy on Twitter. He is always giving himself headlines. Like you said, he in his Twitter bio, he does him, he hoops, he chills, and he goes at people in the quote tweet. So let's get straight into it.
He does indeed. And, you know, for someone as talented as him, arguably a top 20 player of all time, I don't think that's disputed. It's going to be really interesting based off the past couple of years of how his legacy is going to be defined. You know, going from team to team, he was this beloved figure in OKC, become the biggest villain we've ever seen, honestly, going to the Warriors with that sort of God squad that they had. And then his recent runs in Brooklyn and Phoenix haven't exactly shifted the narrative on his career. So we're going to get straight into that today. So, you know, Kevin Durant, what more is there to say? He definitely didn't like the situation in Brooklyn, and that's why he requested out to Phoenix right now. But let's take it back to his days in Oklahoma City. I know that's when I started watching basketball as a fan, and everything about him sort of jumped off the page. Noel, what was your first sort of memory of Kevin Durant?
I mean, it's got to be going up against the Los Angeles Lakers in that 2009-2010 season in the playoffs. All I saw was this 7-footer that claimed he was 6'9" at the time, skinny dude, 3-level scorer, coming out of Texas. Played 1 or 2 years in a Seattle Supersonics jersey before they made that move. And I just remember seeing like that, the OKC jersey, these young guys playing with a ton of energy, a ton of swag. Just, I wouldn't say they had like when you think of a recent team like the Memphis Grizzlies, a young team with, you know, kind of like us against the world, that wasn't really the mentality there. The way I looked at OKC was just these kids coming together and just hooping, just having a good time and putting on for, you know, a market that wasn't super big. So, I mean, to go up against the Lakers and still 2 games away from Kobe Bryant and the Purple and Gold, who went on to win that year, I mean, that's saying something. Because Kobe Bryant, he went on to say that Kevin Durant was the one guy he never fully figured out how to guard, along with Tracy McGrady. So that's my most early memory of him. And then, you know, seeing him go up against LeBron James and the Miami Heat, and they were the baby Thunder at the time. But as me and you, I think we were talking about recently, when you look back at it, a lot of people, they didn't believe in LeBron at the time. And they were kind of poising KD and the Thunder as the favorite in that series. So, yeah, he's been around for a long time. He's definitely one of the most controversial stars that we've seen in this game, in this generation of stars. So, I mean, his legacy, it's nowhere near done. But it's like we're going to talk about, he's one of the most complicated stars when you talk about his legacy right now, Caleb. How about you? I mean, what are some memories that you have of KD early on?
You know, like you said, that 2010 playoff series against the Lakers, I think I was actually able to be in the building. I was in first grade at the time, and I think it was that playoff game, I think game 1 where Los Angeles was at home. I think I was able to sit in on that. I honestly don't remember anything about it other than seeing those blue jerseys against the purple and gold and seeing that number 35 on the back of that really tall dude who seemed to hit every single shot. it was just pretty impressive to see. And now,
Yeah, real quick, sorry to cut you off, Caleb, but speaking of being in the building for OKC and Lakers game, I was actually at the game when Ron Artest made a world peace when he elbowed James Harden in the head. I
wow,
was at that game. Yeah, just had to throw that in there real quick. Continue, please.
that's a callback and a half. But we'll get to Harden and how he paired with that team as well later on today. But yeah, just Durant. He was always so impressive, just even from a young age. A very talented scorer. First All-Star game at 21, and most people don't necessarily break out that early into their careers. But Kevin Durant, he ended up leading the league in scoring from 2010 to 2012, from age 21 to 23. And he's been an all-star every single season since, aside from the year that he obviously tore his Achilles in 2020. But yeah, that finals run in 2012, a lot of people thought that the Young Thunder might, dismantle the Heat because of everything that went on with LeBron losing to the Mavericks early, making fun of Dirk, and ending up losing in 6 there. And in that shortened season, a lot of people took him for granted, I believe. And a lot of people think he didn't have that killer instinct, but LeBron, in a very close series that not many people remember, it was 5 games, but the first 4 of that series were very close. And Durant and Westbrook and Harden, they all kept him in it. And that young core, super impressive when you think about just Seattle trading away Ray Allen to the Boston Celtics and them starting their rebuild that way, as well as moving to a new city and making the finals just 5 years later. I mean, that's pretty impressive stuff, Noel. I mean, yeah, 3 straight MVPs drafted as well. So credit to Sam Presti on that front.
No, Sam Presti has always been the man when it comes to being able to identify, develop, and bring together talent. You even look recent years, you somehow lose KD, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook. Somehow, some way, he didn't get a championship out of that core. You did have a finals appearance. You had a Western Conference finals appearance against the Golden State Warriors where, you really could have taken down what was on paper, on record books, on analytics, a top 5 team of all time, especially offensively. So, but then now you look at what they have now. You have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you have Chet Holmgren, you have J-Dub. You have a really good culture that's one of the best teams in the Western Conference. Sam Presti's honestly up there with some of the best just masterminds in the front office. Just be in this world of basketball, in this planetary system where you just have to balance so many things, so many egos, so much money. He's really second to none, in my opinion, when it comes to doing what he does. So I think it's awesome. But Caleb, just continue telling us a little bit more about kind of why did KD leave a situation that he could have become one of the most beloved basketball players of all time?
Yeah, I think it starts with, you mentioned Sam Presti being a mastermind at the general manager position. The problem with that is I think he had to learn how to become that because of how he fumbled the James Harden situation. People were beginning to talk during that playoff run about how the team in a small market, they couldn't necessarily afford him, push that luxury tax over the limit. And nobody knew it at the time, but new TV deals, they were coming in and a lot more money was about to come and help a lot of front offices out, help a lot of teams out with their cap situations. And Oklahoma City probably could have afforded James Harden had they simply paid $4 million more over the luxury tax. But one fatal flaw after that finals run was that they ended up picking Serge Ibaka, who, don't get me wrong, very talented defender, super athletic, among the league leaders in block shots during his prime, very young and still kept up with that sort of very young nucleus to help for playoff contention. But James Harden, obviously, they traded him to the Rockets for Kevin Martin, a couple first-round picks, and Jeremy Lamb is that young piece back over to OKC. And unfortunately for them, Jeremy Lamb never panned out as that starting 2 guard, whereas James Harden, he was the 6th man of the year, ended up getting the ball in his hands in Houston. And if I remember correctly, in that first game, he had like a 30-point triple-double with Houston in 2013, and he just never looked back since. And, from there, Kevin Martin, while he was a really nice piece, really good 3-point shooter, very underrated for his era in the mid-2000s, I would say. But he's not James Harden. He's not an MVP. So, 2013, all the momentum's behind you. You're the Western Conference champions. Unfortunately for them, first-round matchup against those same Houston Rockets and Harden. Patrick Beverley, everyone's favorite sort of pest, bulldog on defense, whatever you want to call him. Personal vendetta against Russell Westbrook over the years, but I believe it started in this playoff series where he sort of dove at his knees. Russ needed surgery, and unfortunately he missed the rest of that postseason, and OKC bowed out later on. Next season, Russ simply wasn't healthy as well. And Kevin Durant, another scoring title for him this year in 2014. And this man had to play 38 to 39 minutes a game, but he averaged 32 points and ended up becoming the MVP of the league. A lot of people said it would be LeBron coming off of his back-to-back championships. Nearly a unanimous MVP in 2013, where arguably he could have won Defensive Player of the Year over Marc Gasol that year as well. But Kevin Durant won MVP, gave us the classic speech, saying he would run through a brick wall for Russell Westbrook, saying criticism against him was unfair for his shot selection and maybe his sort of go 0 to 100 play style that maybe caused a lot of turnovers. He wasn't trying to hear all that. He was defending his brother. He's done it multiple times in press conferences. I've heard him say it about Mark Cuban, who criticized Russ as well during the playoffs, simply calling him an idiot. Durant called Mark Cuban an idiot. And
That was awesome. That was awesome.
very cool moment of brotherhood right there.
Yeah, when you talk about interviews, when you talk about just capturing the essence of brotherhood and like love in sports like that, that's the perfect answer right there.
And speaking of love in sports, him talking about his mom being the real MVP, everybody knows that moment. And it's been joked about over the years, but sort of at the core of that, the amount of sacrifice that she had to take on for two young kids, getting them out of DC and, raising one of the best basketball players of all time. And their bond is still very strong to this day, I know. In Brooklyn, in Phoenix, she's followed his career and defended him at any point. So, salute to Mama Durant in that way as well. But, in 2014, they had a chance, honestly. I think they really did have a chance. And you go into the playoffs, another high seed. You win the first two rounds, but Serge Ibaka, the guy you picked over James Harden, gets hurt with a calf injury. Now, a lot of people thought he might have been out with that calf injury. But he ended up coming back in sort of a Willis Reed type fashion, if you guys remember back in the day, in the 70s. Calf injury, somehow miraculously plays, and he gave him an energy boost. But they ended up bowing out to the 2014 Spurs. And what a team that was, Noel. What a team.
100%. No, 100%. I mean, that OKC era really was something. And I think that's what hurts me the most. It's just seeing the way it ended, seeing how everything was coming together. You had Russ, who essentially was already playing at an MVP level. Like, I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm a big believer in the fact that when he had that mohawk, that haircut in that year, I think that was when he was playing his best basketball. I mean, he was just going crazy, him and KD. And then you just see the way they ran into a Golden State Warriors team that they were just torching the world. Like, at this point now that I've grown, I've matured, I appreciate basketball. I appreciate all teams. I don't have a team that I hate, but that Golden State Warriors team, that was the closest team that I ever came to hating. Like, I was watching games praying that they were going to lose, that they weren't going to break the Bulls record. And I mean, it ultimately came down to the one game that I couldn't watch was the final one where they actually captured it, because I was watching Kobe Bryant drop 60 points in his farewell game. So, I mean, you gotta take what you give there. But yeah, I mean, Caleb, just dive into that Warriors OKC Western Conference Finals series where it looked like it was about to be KD, LeBron 2.0 in the finals until it wasn't.
Until it wasn't, really. I mean, coming off that 2014 series, I think everybody knew that the Spurs, they just had revenge on their mind, losing that 2013 finals to LeBron. Ray Allen hits that miracle shot in the corner. They go to a game 7, and LeBron takes it. 2014, Spurs come back with a vengeance. Kawhi Leonard wins the finals MVP, locking up LeBron. Just the beautiful Brown team basketball that I don't think has been seen since. I say that until the Warriors. Mark Jackson, he gets ousted as head coach. They feel like they hadn't hit their ceiling with Clay, Steph, and Draymond really starting to hit their stride in 2014. They bring in Steve Kerr 2015, and as soon as LeBron came home to Cleveland as well, once he saw a better situation for himself there, Dwayne Wade had gotten a bit older, Chris Bosh had gotten a bit older. 5-game series, he swaps that out for Kevin Love, who he traded for, and Kyrie Irving. They get a few pieces at the deadline, Iman Shumpert and J.R. Smith. And, chemistry issues aside, poor coaching aside, I know that LeBron later ousted David Blatt as head coach in for Tyronn Lue the next year. But in that 2015 series, LeBron was pretty much doing it by himself. And I feel like the Thunder could have been there as well, had, KD not broken his foot, had that Jones fracture all season coming off that MVP year. And Russ by himself, you mentioned he played at an MVP level. I think that KD's absence definitely helped him to do that. The ball's in his hands more. And he really got a sense of being the man on his own team. And I think that's one of the factors that ended up breaking up OKC, but we'll get to that later. 2016, everything's perfect, picture perfect. You get rid of the Spurs. Had a crazy team that year. Kawhi Leonard finally, stepping into an MVP-like role. Still have Tim Duncan, LaMarcus Aldridge on that team as well. You take them out, and you go up against the Warriors. You're up 3-1. Now, a 3-1 lead, it's about as sure of a thing as anything in sports, really. But surprisingly, those have been blown in basketball more than I thought, honestly. And they control games 1-4, really. But Durant, unfortunately for him, 12 of 31 shooting in Game 5, 10 for 31 in Game 6, and that's the legacy game for Klay Thompson, where they were down big in that fourth quarter. Klay turns into the Human Torch, hits 3 after 3, shuts up the fans of Oklahoma City, and honestly just sucks the air out of the building. And heading to Oracle that year in a Game 7, I remember that they had a 10-point halftime lead. I saw that Game 7, and I was like you, Noel. I was praying that somebody would take this golden boy, baby-faced assassin out, and they just couldn't do it. Durant, try as he might, played nearly the entire game, 10 for 19, but Russell Westbrook in that game, 33%, 7 of 21, and they end up losing by 8. Steph Curry goes to the finals back-to-back years, but he too would blow a 3-1 lead to LeBron James in one of the best comeback stories we've ever seen. Honestly, maybe the best season of NBA basketball ever. I don't know what your take is on that, Noel, but yeah, 3-1 comeback, very legendary. And, yeah.
Very, very good times. 2016, amazing year. I think we're gonna be telling our grandparents our grandchildren about that year, just because amazing all around, not just sports, just a lot of good memories that I think many people agree on. But yeah, I mean that series very, very telling. I think when you saw how everything went down, even though there was that sense of loyalty, you were hoping that KD was going to stick with those roots, going to stick with the same city that kind of watched them become a superstar. I mean, just seeing the meetings that he was going to take afterwards. He met with the Boston Celtics. Tom Brady was reportedly in attendance. I know the San Antonio Spurs were in the mix. That was a team that I thought could have been very, very interesting had they been able to land that and pair Kawhi Leonard and Kevin Durant. I think that would have been a crazy, crazy perimeter duo, much better than what we've seen from Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And the LA Clippers, no shade to them, is just a prime KD and a prime Kawhi would have. I mean, that's crazy, crazy duo right there. But when you look at what the Golden State Warriors had to offer, just putting everything else aside, putting media aside, putting fan notices aside, putting what happened in the playoffs the year before, you have a team that could not get past LeBron James. They had done it the year before, and then they almost did it this year. Say what you want, but there were injuries on both sides in both series. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love both got hurt the year before. You have Draymond, who got ejected. Stephen Curry was playing through his own injuries. So it was essentially 1-1. And the problem is that the Golden State Warriors, they were trying to build a dynasty. They were trying to do whatever they could in order to ensure that they were going to be stacking championships year after year after year after year. That is why they brought in Steve Kerr to do what Mark Jackson was not able to. And then you go to someone like KD, who was by far the most marquee free agent on the market that year, who was obviously unhappy with how things ended the past couple of seasons, who hadn't been able to capture the number one thing on his mind, the championship. And it was the perfect fit. I hate to say it. I really do hate to say it, because it was bad for sports. It was bad for the game. And it's set basketball back a couple of years until we finally started to see some parity again. But I mean, what were your general thoughts on the move at the time, Caleb? Because I know you were livid.
Livid, to say the least, because I really like LeBron James back in the day. I love that story of, because he was what really made me first fall in love with basketball in 2010. Seeing his hyper athletic form. He was a pitbull on defense at that point still too. Miami, he bulked up, became the villain, but he decided to come home, and who doesn't love a good homecoming story? When I first heard that move, it felt like all the joy from seeing that 3-1 comeback kind of just left my soul. I remember just waking up on July 4th, it's summer break. You don't have to worry about school. And then you get the Woj report that Kevin Durant's joined the Warriors. So they essentially replaced Harrison Barnes, who did not have a good finals. And I think that was part of the reason why they sort of shipped him out later on. You replace him with a 7-foot demigod, a wing, a 3-level scorer, and mind you, very underrated defender, because he was rangy, he could switch, he was tall enough to block littler guys, he could defend the post. And like you said, it was just a perfect fit. Now, for me, personally, him leaving Oklahoma City was never my issue. It was always the fact that he went to Golden State.
Yep.
That's where I had the issues because you mentioned Boston. You think about it, Isaiah Thomas, he was a rising star, heart over height. He was playing like Goliath in where he looked more like David, really. 5'9", averaging 29 points a game. We all know about the legendary game for his sister who died in that car accident. 50 points in the playoffs, gave his heart and soul for Boston. But instead of signing them, they went with Gordon Hayward and Al Horford. Two great pieces, but that team never really panned out due to injuries, and that current core kind of fizzled away. While they had a young Jaylen Brown at that time, they just drafted him. Jason Tatum, they got him a year later. It was just different, It was different, and Kevin Durant decided he didn't want to be there, even though he would have been the number one option. You mentioned San Antonio. Who wouldn't want to play for Coach Popovich? And, sort of the aging core of that big three of Tony Parker, Manu, and Tim Duncan. Only 2 years removed from a championship. And I feel like they could have gotten one more out of them, especially with Kawhi Leonard finally coming into his own and becoming a perennial MVP candidate at that point. Surefire Defensive Player of the Year candidate at that point as well. He paired him with KD. Like, who knows what would happen? Two unstoppable wing scorers, and that defense, honestly, it would have been pretty good too. And then you think about some of the other outlier teams. Maybe hometown played into a factor, but if a team like DC with that great backcourt duo of John Wall and Bradley Beal, if they, could finally get healthy and get that final piece, who knows what could have happened out east either, because that Washington Wizards team, I always felt like they were just one piece away. They had really good bigs and Nene and
John Wall was my guy.
Yeah. Nene, Torchy Gortat. They had Paul Pierce over the years, and he had a clutch shot in the playoffs. That was kind of cool, but it wasn't really going to lead you anywhere. So you have that with Kevin Durant. Maybe that could have led you somewhere, but ultimately he chose the Warriors. And like you said, perfect situation. You got two off-ball shooters in Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, the perfect defensive Swiss Army knife in Draymond Green, and someone who's emotional enough to get up in your face and sort of drive that home. And whatever big man you wanted to throw in there, I mean, it really didn't matter because they weren't going to play at the end of the game because you had Andre Iguodala, who took that six-man role and, basically made the Hamptons 5, if everyone remembers that. Just defense, shooting, versatility, switchability, it had everything. And, basketball for 3 seasons, what could you do?
Yeah.
What could you do, Noel?
Yeah. No, 100%. And, I mean, that's kind of like moving on into this complicating KD's legacy thing. It's the pinnacle of it. It's the pinnacle that the best seasons of his career, where he won titles, where he was the best player on title teams. It's just hard. It's hard to gain the respect, not just fans, but I mean, you look at what legends have to say about it. You look what respected front office members, even other players. Other players, they don't necessarily call him out because, I mean, he's still one of the coldest players in the game. But I'm sure later down the line on these players' podcasts, they're going to be talking about the 2017 through 2019 seasons where the Golden State Warriors were on top of the world. And I mean, it almost felt cheated in a way because you have these homegrown kids, these homegrown stars, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, who they brought this whole new style of basketball to the game. They were running gun. They were shooting all kinds of threes. Steph Curry was pulling from the logo the first minute into a game. He was, there's 3 seconds left on the clock. They could have called a timeout against OKC. Instead, he decides to pull from just inside half court, no hesitation. And you add Kevin Durant, and it's like, wow, like how do we even get here? It's like they went 0 to 100, Yeah. And it sucks too because, like, as much as I didn't like the Warriors when, Curry first burst out onto the scene and everybody was bandwagoning on them, it's like, man, it's like you just kicked everybody while they were down when you had Kevin Durant. And I mean, when you look how everything transpired and what Kevin Durant really wanted, he wanted a city to love him, but he also wanted to win.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when he saw that he was essentially still being placed as a number 2 behind LeBron James, even though he beat him twice in the NBA Finals, that's kind of where I think he decided to take a step back, and he was like, does the city really love me, or do they still love Steph more than me? Do my teammates love me when Draymond Green is calling me the B word and we're going at it and we don't really talk the rest of the season? And then you also don't get to finish the job against a Toronto Raptors team that was pretty much put together in a year when they got Kawhi Leonard via trade, and then you get injured. And he's like, do I really want to come back when Steph Curry's going to have a whole season to himself to kind of show everybody that he's still the man? So, I mean, I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Caleb. What do you think led to that inevitable exit from the Golden State Warriors just 3 seasons in?
I think you're exactly right. And look no further than his old team in Russell Westbrook. Exactly like the season that he left, Russ turned into an MVP. And I don't say that figuratively. He literally became the MVP, averaging the first triple-double we've seen in, what was it, like 50 years? Because Oscar Robertson did it in like 62, I believe. And Russell Westbrook put up like 31, 11, and 11, something crazy like that. And Russ, he gained the love of the city because he decided to stay. You know, it was always Russ and KD as a dynamic duo, but Russ in that 2015 season, you could definitely see something change in him. And once he got the ball in his hands more, became the highest usage player in the league. He really took off. And while that team might not have won anything, they made trades to sort of shuffle out that old core. I know they traded Serge Ibaka in that offseason for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis to the Magic. And that was an interesting move because what if KD stays and those two young pieces develop alongside them and they could sort of, reload and retool that young roster? Who knows what could have happened with Russ, KD, and those two young pieces? But instead, Durant chose the easy way. He's always going to say it's the hardest road. That Players Tribune article, it really didn't sit well with me because how hard is the road when you're cakewalking your way through the entire West? 2017, they only lost one game. How hard is that really? I want to say 2018 was that best shot when his old buddy Harden paired up with Chris Paul. They came so close to winning, but that 0 for 27 in Game 7 of that series where they had a double-digit lead, Harden ran out of gas. Eric Gordon couldn't hit shots. Trevor Ariza couldn't hit shots. Basically, everybody on that team simply couldn't hit shots, and they got an easy cakewalk to the finals in 2018 again. And then you talk about 2019, the Clippers, it was cool. They got 2 games off of them as an 8th seed. Good job by Doc Rivers on that front. But Warriors basically mowed down the West as well. Kevin Durant courageously, I'll give him that credit. He courageously came back after that calf injury in the Houston series in the second round. Came back to play, unfortunately tore his Achilles in that Game 5. And the Warriors ended up losing on their home floor in Game 6. But throughout that whole process, you could tell Steph was always going to be the more beloved one. He was the guy that came there, suffered through those ankle injuries, took way less money on that extension from his rookie deal on his second contract, and that's obviously what allowed them the cap space to sign Kevin Durant. Just those perfect stars aligned. But it was always Steph's team. He was drafted by them. He was the hometown kid, much like Durant was in OKC. But the difference is Steph stayed, and he didn't mind taking a back seat, but he was still always going to be beloved because of what he'd given them the 2 seasons prior, where he already won MVP for that franchise and wasn't necessarily an outsider coming in. So that's my take on it.
No, 100% facts. And I mean, I think this is the perfect kind of transition point into this latter stage of his career, which, I mean, you would think that it would kind of be a fresh start. It would kind of be where he starts mowing out his legacy and getting back in the good graces of the basketball world. But I wouldn't say the opposite has happened, but I don't think the case has been helped much. And, his greatness, we're never going to dispute that. Like you said at the beginning of the video, 7-foot demigod, really no flaws in his game. I mean, he's got some of the smoothest handles and jump shot out of any players. And the dude is 7 feet. Dude should not be moving like this. He recently passed Alvin Hayes on the all-time scoring list at the number 11 spot. I think if he stays healthy, he has a great chance to reach all the way up to the number 8 spot in the next 2 years, which means he will pass Shaquille O'Neal, the great Diesel. And that is going to be quite something. I mean, 2-time NBA champion, 2-time Finals MVP, 13-time All-Star, 6-time All-NBA first team. So like we said, he stacked up everything that he needs to when it comes to accolades, but he hasn't won outside of Golden State Warriors. And looking when he signed with Brooklyn, that was a bit of a shocker because, I mean, the Brooklyn Nets, they hadn't been doing much for the past decade. You had that fun little team with D'Angelo Russell, Jared Dudley, Spencer Dinwiddie, all those guys. That was a fun team, I'm not going to lie. But, I mean, him and Kyrie Irving, they had the opportunity to team up in New York. They could have been in the bigger market. They could have brought that franchise back to its good graces. But for some reason, they don't like it. KD said hell no when asked if he would sign with the New York Knicks. But I mean, when you look at why things didn't work out in Brooklyn, Kevin Durant had this quote when he was traded from the Brooklyn Nets to the Phoenix Suns. He said, there just wasn't no consistency, no continuity on who we were as a team. And when you want to win a championship, you've got to build an identity from day one. And it was just a lot of circumstances that were out of the players' control that got in the way of us building our continuity. And I do see what he's saying here because the talent was all there for them to win. When it was just him and Kyrie Irving, they had Jared Allen. They had a very, very good young role players that I think complemented both their skill sets. But, I mean, when you start off a season when you have to miss the entire year because of an Achilles injury, you're setting yourself a year back. When teams sign superstars, they want them to play. I mean, luckily, we're baseball fans here. The Dodgers, they got Shohei Ohtani. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to pitch, but he's still going to be able to hit. So, like you said, imagine if he wasn't able to do either. Imagine how the fans would feel. Imagine how the front office would feel. That's just, you're putting yourself on a turnstile where you're a year behind everybody else. And it does suck because I think Brooklyn was a place where KD could have rebuilt his legacy, and the dominoes were very much there for him to do so. But an unfortunate amount of them just didn't fall his way. I mean, as a franchise, the Nets have no championships to their name unless you count the two they won in the 1970s when they were part of the American Basketball Association. So KD could have done something special along with his best friend at the time, Kyrie Irving. And like I said, they didn't want to go to New York. People say it's because they didn't want the limelight. I think it's pretty interesting because neither of them like being criticized by the media. But in his 2.5 years with the Brooklyn Nets, he averaged 29 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. That first year was essentially just for fans to be wowed by Kyrie Irving going crazy with his ankle breakers and his highlights. But I mean, KD himself, the best ability is always going to be availability, and he never played more than 55 games in a season for Brooklyn. Obviously, the last season was cut short due to trade, but even though he looked great after that Achilles injury, he looked probably as best as I've ever seen a star or any player come back from probably one of the worst injuries in sports. He still was missing times, like you said, due to ankle injuries, did a lot of lower body stuff. But that 2020-2021 playoff run, Caleb, I know you know that one very, very well.
Oh, yeah.
Very well as a Bucks fan. I mean, the dude was going berserk. Throughout 17 games of the playoffs, 34 points per game, 9 rebounds per game, 4 assists per game. Now, I know you were dialed in heavily to that Bucks and that Nets series. I mean, just what do you think watching KD coming back from surgery and being in this new situation?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a while for you to get your sea legs under you from an Achilles injury. And what really benefited him was the 2020 season carrying over into the bubble, I think. But for someone as dedicated to the game as KD, we really don't know anything about his romantic relationships. None of his friends really. He just seems like he got a guy that strictly focuses on basketball. He's in love with the game, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, especially when you see sort of how his return showed up. When I saw them against those, like, that Boston team in the first round where they were checking out Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier, it was basically just Tatum because I know that Jaylen Brown had missed the series. And frankly, I don't think it would have been too close with him either, but they ended up dispatching them in 5 games, I believe. Yeah. And that big three of both KD, James Harden after that trade, and Kyrie Irving, they combined for 104 points in one of those games. Ridiculous stuff. And honestly, in my mind, while the Bucks, they'd taken care of the Heat and Jimmy Butler after, revenge for that bubble season, they scared me a lot. And Kevin Durant was at the top of that list because we had Giannis, who, as great of a help defender as he is, he's above average on the perimeter, but quicker guards and forwards like Kevin Durant would pose problems. So he stuck veteran PJ Tucker on him. And I know that he talked about the game plan was let him go one-on-one and let him beat me and keep doing it. But my God, he kept doing it. I mean, 49 points in that game 5, where, mind you, the Bucks had a 17-point lead in that game early in the first half. And, credit to Kevin Durant, but also Jeff Green, who went crazy from 3 in that game as well. But it was Kevin Durant that stole the show. 49-point triple-double. It's a crazy 3 to put him up 4 with about 40 seconds left, and whole building's going nuts. And if you're a Bucks team, you got to be demoralized after that because you had such a big lead and you give it all away and you have a chance to steal it on the road and then come back at home to clinch in a game 6 and you fumble it. You frankly just fumble it because of just one guy. Because James Harden, he ends up getting hurt in the first game of that series with a hamstring injury. And frankly, hasn't really looked the same since, because he tried to play through it at the end of that series, and that might have hurt his future playoff production for his later teams. And then you got Kyrie Irving, who in that game 4 in that series, he gets hurt by an ankle sprain. Unfortunately, it landed on Giannis's foot, turns it. So basically, it's just Kevin Durant and a bunch of nobodies, other than Jeff Green for that game 5. But the man did it, and I believe he played 48 minutes for the final 3 games, all 3 games. The amount of energy that it takes, not just physically, but mentally, and especially that game 7, and what a game that was. Every basketball fan knows that game 7. His toes on the line at the end, but to even get him there, like down by 4, he makes 2 clutch baskets. They sent it to overtime. No one can hit a shot, and he takes that last one when they're down by 2. Drew Holiday's defending him. Everybody thinks it's online, going in, falls just short, out of bounds. And that was honestly their best chance, because even without Kyrie Irving for extended period of time and half of James Harden, I still believe that they would have won the finals in that year. That Nets team was absolutely scary, man. Absolutely scary.
No, definitely. I think when you look at how James Harden was able to shift from being a do-it-all guy, a do-it-all scorer, dropping 40, 50, 60-point triple-doubles with Houston Rockets, and then you enter a new situation in Brooklyn where he became the point guard, Kyrie Irving was the score for a shooting guard, and Kevin Durant could just, get the ball whenever he wanted, every spot on the floor, fully healthy, doing his thing. They had great spacing with guys like Joe Harris. You eventually did get Seth Curry later on in that James Harden trade, but, just a lot of floor spacing. You had Jeff Green, who, seems like he gets better with age. He's like fine wine. It's crazy to say that. Even today he had a crazy dunk as a member of the Houston Rockets. So shout out Uncle Jeff for sure. But unfortunately, like you said, injuries. Injury bug got them really good, especially James Harden. You fast forward to that next season where Kyrie Irving had his whole vaccine situation. Kevin Durant, once again, himself struggled with injuries. And it felt like whenever KD wasn't there to kind of oversee everything with the Brooklyn Nets, things would go bad. It's like KD was kind of like the teacher. Once he left, the students would just kind of start doing whatever they wanted. Yeah. James Harden, he decided to be asked to be moved, claimed that Philly was where he wanted to be all along. Brooklyn Nets granted his wishes. They traded him along with Paul Millsap to the 76ers in exchange for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks. And on paper, that's a pretty good haul. On paper, with no other information known, that's a nice haul for a Brooklyn Nets team that has Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. You have a Ben Simmons who, elite on both ends, except for shooting. Great transition guy, great with size. Seth Curry spaced the floor. Andre Drummond historically puts up good numbers, but wouldn't really translate to wins. But then again, he was playing on teams that weren't very good. So, can't really knock him there. But Ben Simmons, the confidence, the health, just never panned out, unfortunately. I really wanted to see him come back in that series against Boston where the Nets got swept, and that was pretty much a sign of everything coming crashing down and burning. After that haul, once we realized what Ben Simmons was, how his fit with the team wasn't very good when he was on the court, and then he wasn't able to be on the court at all. Somehow, some way, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, they led the Nets to be one of the best teams in the East that season. Even at one point in time, they were the number 1 seed. Unfortunately, KD went down with an injury once again. And after that, Kyrie Irving, he decided to follow in the path of James Harden, and he decided that he was done as well. Behind his best friend Kevin Durant's back, he requested a trade to the Brooklyn Nets front office. Not too long after that, he was dealt to the Dallas Mavericks. And then Kevin Durant also requested a trade. And Caleb, you and I both remember exactly where we were when that Phoenix Suns alert hit our phone that Kevin Durant was headed over there. I was in line at In-N-Out. Do you remember where you were?
Oh, man. I think it definitely had to be in my dorm room. And I remember just texting my friends about how you could kind of sense it, especially with the Suns. Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, they had gotten more on-the-ball responsibilities. And after sort of a disappointing season for them, 64 wins in 2022, you get basically 2-piece by Luka Doncic in back-to-back games. Legendary quote from him. Everybody acts tough when they're up. And he proved that. My goodness, he proved that. That game 7, absolute slaughter. So when you want to talk about Phoenix making a big move and trying to get back into sort of championship contention, what better way to do that than with, 2-time champion, 1-time MVP, 2-time finals MVP, Kevin Durant. And they gave up 4 first-round picks and those 2 assets to bring him to Phoenix. And with that, the Nets also traded away Kyrie Irving. They got Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie back, as well as a first-round pick there. And the Nets really started their rebuild from there, whereas Dallas and Phoenix, those two teams that met in the playoffs the year before, they sort of reaped those rewards. And it was crazy because all that star power, you think about Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Ayton. And maybe the idea of that, in hindsight, was better than we all thought, but that sort of star-studded roster, Devin Booker, one of the best young stars in the game, Chris Paul, the veteran who can simply play make and get the ball to everybody, and DeAndre Ayton, who showed a lot of promise in the 2020 postseason until he ran into Giannis, but it's tough for another day. Just a lot of good pieces around them, and you'd think that would be enough for a championship, but last season it didn't work out either. Denver, team chemistry, perfectly built starting lineup. You have 3D guys all over the floor, playmakers, and Jokic, as well as Jamal Murray. That two-man game worked to perfection. And Michael Porter Jr., guy who he might not swing the rock, but he can knock down a shot, that's for sure. 40% three-point shooter, long, rangy, improving on the defensive end. And they took him down in 6 with another 30-point loss at home. So when you think about Phoenix and how they are now, they traded away Chris Paul. They brought in Bradley Beal. They shipped out DeAndre Ayton. They brought in Grayson Allen as well as Yusuf Nurkic for depth. Filled the roster with a lot of veteran minimums. Eric Gordon and Drew Eubanks among the most prominent of those. But this season still really hasn't panned out. They're near that 500 mark in that play-in range. And, lineup's been in and out. Same problem as we had in Brooklyn. Devin Booker, he's been hurt a little bit. Bradley Beal, he's been hurt for a majority of the season. And Kevin Durant, I know he missed tonight's game as well. And this is after the first win in the Big Three era with Beal, Booker, and Kevin Durant. So those recent comments that he made about, or rather how Woj found out that he might not be happy and frustration might be mounting, I believe it, because Durant, to me, it seems like he always wants to handpick everybody, kind of like LeBron James as a GM, where you handpick the players that you want to play with, you handpick the coach that you might want to play with. I know he got Steve Nash ousted last season in place of Jacques Vaughn back in Brooklyn. Same thing happens to Monty Williams. You bring in Frank Vogel this year. It always seems like he wants the perfect situation and to do the least amount of work possible. And frankly, that style of basketball just didn't work, really. Last year proved it. Denver took him out in 6 and with relative ease. And who knows what's going to happen this season with the stacked Western Conference. I mean, Minnesota weren't necessarily contenders. They're at the top of the table this season. OKC, you add Chet Holmgren back into the fold. And considering their youth, the fact that they're at the 2 seed with super impressive wins this entire month, really, it's going to be really interesting to see what Phoenix does. I still think they're going to make the playoffs eventually, but whether or not they can win a championship with such a top-heavy roster and luxury tax coming in with the new CBA rules next year, I just don't know if Kevin Durant's going to be able to do it, and he might request out again, as shocking as that may be for some people.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the money with a lot of those takes right there. And I mean, you look at the Western Conference right now, and I just don't get it. I mean, the Bradley Beal move, it sounds great, adding Bradley Beal to a team with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. But we saw last year in the playoffs against Denver, taking turns isoing between Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. It looks great. And when they can hit difficult shots, that's great. But when that is your number one form of offense, you're not going to be able to win a whole lot of games. And even if you win the regular season, you're not going to be able to go on deep playoff runs. I know last year, Kevin Durant, he only got to play about 8 regular season games with Phoenix. So really the chemistry wasn't there going into the playoffs. It was more of a just, hey, you have Kevin Durant. How hard can it be to plug him into your offense? But when you run into a team like Denver, who, like you said, they have years of experience together. You have Nikola Jokic, who does it all for them on offense. You have Jamal Murray, who was essentially turning back into Bubble Murray. And then all their other role players that perfectly suit everything else. The Phoenix Suns, they saw what happened. They're like, let's clean house. Let's trade our point guard. Let's get a new coach. And let's bring in another ISO scorer. And I mean, when the three have played together, they look really good. But Bradley Beal, he's already missed so much time. And the injuries he has, they've been kind of evident that it's been stacking up over the past couple of years, even during his time with Washington. And I mean, also, not in a bad way, but you bring in a dude who hadn't won in a while. Ever since the John Wall days, he hadn't been able to do much. I think he won a scoring title over Steph, right? Was that? Yes.
Yeah.
He won that scoring title. He, got a bag. He stayed in Washington for some time. Him and Damian Lillard were like two guys who everybody wanted to see on different teams, but it could never happen. And now it happened. Dame's in Milwaukee in a really good situation. Bradley Beal, he's in Phoenix. He's playing with great players, but the results are going to have to show eventually. And I mean, if KD does request outs, I'm just not too sure where else he really can go at this point. Do you have any idea, any notable teams you think would be willing to make the move that maybe he could win?
Honestly, I mean, that's another great point you make, because it kind of feels like he's overstayed his welcome. It feels like he stubbed that ticket way too many times. Golden State, it was a free agency move. You get that. OKC, home team drafted you, stayed for a second contract. We get that. But Brooklyn, you requested a trade out. And Phoenix, you requested a trade like two there. And it seems like he, again, just wants all that control and doesn't want to do any of the work other than, on the court. He's still putting up 37 and 6 this season. Great averages, really good mid-range scorer still. Pretty good help defender as well, even at his advanced age at 35. Probably going to be an all-star, maybe a starter, depending on, where positional value lies. But in terms of teams that could take him on, this would be a crazy one if he went back to OKC with all those picks. And, Phoenix does need a point guard, I would believe. But at that point, and I feel like Josh Giddey might fit that mold. He seems like the odd man out in OKC with all those picks that they have. But at that point, it's kind of like the Kawhi situation in 2019 that I keep referring to for whatever reason, 3 straight episodes. But it's like you have a team with KD, meant for KD, but you're not going to have KD at that point. So, and you basically pushed all your chips into the table. Matt Ishbia, a new owner, he wants to make a splash, and he did so with these 2 big trades in the offseason. But if it's just Bradley Beal on that no trade clause, and he specifically waived it only to go to Phoenix, you have Devin Booker, who knows how unhappy he's going to be, because I feel like he's suffered through some really tough basketball. He's seen a couple playoff runs, established himself as one of the best players in the game. He's going to be an all-star as well, I think. But this season, I don't want to say it feels like make or break, because they're all locked into long-term contracts. KD with that extension, Booker with his extension, and obviously Beal. But really, what team is going to take him for as many assets as it's going to take to get that? Is his personality going to mesh well enough for where you can build that chemistry, as well as his health concerns over the past couple seasons? I just don't see a destination. So he might honestly just be stuck in the desert for all we know.
There you go. There you have it. That's going to be one of the biggest storylines to watch. We're going to see maybe Phoenix to get a little active at the trade market. You never know what team is going to be selling. You never know what surprise move could come up. You never know who's going to be on the buyout market that essentially wants to, maybe hop on that team. Maybe John Wall comes out of retirement, plays a little bit of point guard for that Phoenix team, reunites with his boy Bradley Beal. The Phoenix Suns, definitely keep an eye on them. This is just one of many episodes that we're going to take, kind of looking at the career of many players, seeing how they got to where they are today, and kind of just taking a deep dive into different stops between different stars in their careers. But Caleb, thank you, my man, for joining me once again. First episode of 2024. Really looking forward to all the content coming this year. Appreciate you joining me, my guy.
Thank you.
Sir. And you guys have a good rest of your day, and we'll catch